The ability to communicate from machine to machine over long distances is revolutionizing the way the world does business today. Low-cost data communications make much of what we now take for granted possible, from national newspapers to banking transactions. Now we're finding that the costs are not so low after all. As line charges increase and the volume of communications grows, techniques for improving the speed and efficiency of data transmission are becoming more and more important to business. The key to more efficient use of transmission lines lies in the observation that very few communications links can be used at full capacity 100% of the time. For example, interactive data terminals use only about 5% of a 1200 bits per second line's capacity. Even a good typist working at 60 words per minute is transmitting data at only 60 bits per second, or about 5% of capacity. It's becoming increasingly important to use each leased line to its full capacity. Historically, each device which needed to communicate with a computer had its own private telephone circuit. Now it is important to share leased lines where sharing is feasible. The technique for sharing a single communications line by making several channels out of the single channel is multiplexing. The device which makes it possible to send and receive several channels of information over a single telephone line is the multiplexer. Because multiplexers alter the way data is sent over telephone lines, they must be used in pairs, one at each end of the line. There are essentially two types of multiplexing. They are frequency division multiplexing and time division multiplexing. First, frequency division multiplexing. As you know, digital information must be converted to analog information to be transmitted over telephone lines. A typical telephone line will send only analog voice-type information using roughly from 300 Hertz, or cycles per second, to 3300 Hertz. Digital information must be converted to analog signals that are within the 300 to 3300 Hertz limits. Phone line capacity for digital information is limited to this 3 kilohertz bandwidth. Frequency division multiplexers divide this 3 kilohertz phone line into channels that are each just a portion of the total. The more channels you make from a single phone line, the smaller the capacity for each subchannel. The technique of frequency division multiplexing is similar to what cable television systems do to the cable that brings the signals to your home. The cable is like phone line, and each TV channel is one of many frequency-divided subchannels. The phone line, though, has much less information capacity. One TV channel has the bandwidth equal to 2,000 voice-grade phone lines. A typical frequency division multiplexed phone line might carry 4 channels, each at 300 bits per second. There is some frequency space or guard band between each channel. 4 channels at 300 BPS total only 1200 bits per second. Not very good when 9600 bits per second modems are both common and low cost. Time division multiplexing is much more effective for phone line communications. Time division multiplexers are digital devices, so they require modems between the TDMs and the phone lines. There are 2 types of TDMs, bit interleaved and character interleaved. Both types assign 1 slot per low-speed channel, either a bit slot or a character slot. These slots are always allocated, whether or not the terminal or computer port has any data to fill the available slot. Each terminal is identified by its slot position on the high-speed TDM to TDM channel. For time division multiplexers, the sum of the port speeds must be equal to or less than the high-speed channel. For asynchronous character interleaved multiplexing, the multiplexer can strip the start bit and stop bit, and perhaps the parity bit too, for a 20 to 30% increase in high-speed line capacity. When the bits are stripped at one end, they're restored at the opposite end of the line. The excess line capacity can then be used for extra channels or to pass RS-232C control signal information. Control signals include request to send, data terminal ready, data carrier detect, ring indicator, and so on. In practice today, bit interleave time division multiplexers are used for synchronous multiplexing. Character multiplexers are used for asynchronous multiplexing. Async data, with its start and stop bits defining character boundaries, is easy to place into TDM character slots. With asynchronous transmission, such as a user typing at a terminal, the data goes only one way at a time, either to the computer or back to the terminal. Typing at a terminal is not a very efficient use of data communications. Remember, 60 words per minute is only 60 bits per second. That's only 5% of a 1200 BPS line, and there is no error correction. The multiplexing techniques described so far are fixed and rigid. They require no special processing and cannot react to changing loads or needs. The introduction of the microprocessor has made intelligent and efficient multiplexing possible. The new breed of intelligent multiplexers are called statistical multiplexers or data concentrators. Allocation of the time on the data line is based on demand rather than some fixed allocation scheme. To make use of a greater proportion of the total line capacity, it's necessary to connect more devices than can use the line simultaneously. The idea is to use the microprocessor and a memory buffer to accept traffic volumes, which may at times exceed the capacity of the line, and transmit the data at a constant rate as close as possible to the total line capacity. This scheme will work as long as two conditions are met. First, the incoming data should not exceed the capacity of the buffer to store it until it can be transmitted. Second, the average long-term volume of incoming data cannot exceed the capacity of the line. The maximum rate at which data is delivered to the concentrator, another term for statistical multiplexer, is usually 2 to 4 times the rate at which the shared channel can carry the data. The concentrator works because it is very unlikely that the total port traffic delivered will exceed the shared high-speed capacity longer than it can be buffered. If input does exceed the line capacity longer than it can be buffered, an overload condition exists. Either data must be discarded into the bit bucket, hardly an acceptable solution, or the transmitting device must be told to stop transmitting until the overload can be corrected. The process of halting data traffic is called flow control. Flow control stops data before the buffers overflow, before data drops into the so-called bit bucket, where it would be lost. There are two types of flow control, hardware and software. Hardware flow control is performed between the multiplexer and the computer port or terminal using one of the control leads, usually clear to send or data terminal ready. The control is on when data can pass and off when data has to halt. The second type of flow control is called software flow control. A pair of characters are exchanged between the multiplexers and the terminals or computer ports. The characters are usually X on and X off, also called DC3 and DC1. On a terminal keyboard, they are Control S and Control Q. Most flow control is either the statistical multiplexer telling the computer ports to stop and resume transmission, or remote printers telling the multiplexer to halt before the printer buffer gets too full. In theory, a 9600 bits per second shared channel can support only 4 2400 bits per second data sources. In fact, this is true only if the data sources are continuously active. In a simple order entry system where each data source sends intermittent short bursts of data, the total theoretical momentary load can be as high as 32 times the actual line capacity. That is, a single 9600 bits per second line may support as many as 32 devices, each capable of sending at 9600 bits per second. Statistical multiplexing depends on the assumption that no device will transmit at 100% capacity. In fact, If 32 devices are attached to a multiplexer, each can, on average, use no more than 1/32, 3% of the total capacity available. There is no free lunch. In the world of Data Comm, printers present special problems. Printers don't wait. They're not interactive. They have an insatiable appetite for paper and an uncontrollable urge to deposit ink on it. Therefore, you should anticipate that heavily used printers will use much more channel capacity than will CRTs. We've talked a lot about how multiplexers work. Now we will look at several ways they can be used in Data Comm systems. The most basic statistical multiplexer configuration consists of several async computer ports and terminals linked together over a single phone line. The phone line is full duplex, either private line using synchronous high-speed modems, or with more recent models, dial-up full duplex modems. At one end of the line, a statistical multiplexer concentrates several computer ports into the single high-speed modem. At the other end, the multiplexer takes the data off the high-speed synchronous link and distributes the data to the appropriate terminals. The synchronous protocol between the multiplexers adds the benefit of error correction to the asynchronous devices that otherwise have no error correction. The error correction is referred to in the StatMux literature as ARQ. ARQ stands for Automatic Repeat Request. The StatMux can automatically request that the data sent in error be retransmitted, thus correcting any high-speed channel errors. Another term for the error correction method is go back N. This means go back and resend some number of blocks of data. N is the number of blocks the StatMux asks to resend. The asynchronous terminal ports on a StatMux can be set to a variety of speeds. Each port can be set to a different speed, perhaps to different parity, or number of bits per character. Ports are set by switches, by front panel menus, or by control console terminals. Once a number of terminals are concentrated into a StatMux, it's often desirable to have a terminal dial into the remote multiplexer. You may want to work at home or have another office in the same area, and you want to avoid a long distance call or another dedicated line back to the central computer. The remote modem off the back end of a multiplexer is called a tail circuit. The tail circuit can be a private line as well as dial-up. When using tail circuits, the tail circuit can be another StatMux. For example, the main link might use an 8-channel multiplexer, and you use a 2-channel mux to accomplish the tail circuit. These smart statistical multiplexers must address the data, so if it comes in on port 1 at one end, it exits port 1 on the other end. These smart protocols are also used to address entire multiplexers. This allows multi-drop networks using the StatMuxes. A multi-point environment has more than 2 locations connected to the communications channel. When more than 2 multiplexers are attached to the channel, it is necessary to designate one as the master. This master will poll the other slave multiplexers in the same way a computer polls terminals in a synchronous system. No slave multiplexer can communicate directly with another slave multiplexer, but data can be retransmitted by the master multiplexer. Multipoint multiplexing, when employed, is used to reduce phone line costs. Multipoint multiplexing may increase communications flexibility, but because of the polling process, the effective line capacity may be only half that of point-to-point communications. Full duplex terminal use is not recommended for multi-drop statistical multiplexing. The time from a key press until the echo back to the screen is too long. Switching and contention multiplexers allow a larger number of users to contend for a limited number of computer ports. They may also allow users to select ports of one or more computers, switching from one computer to another. There are usually more remote terminals than there are computer ports. Users request service and get connected to a central port only if one is available. There are a wide variety of other statistical multiplexer features, often designed to make the muxes more marketable. Many muxes allow the user to set up the remote unit in a slave mode. All parameters such as port speeds, parity, and bits per character can be set at the central site and downloaded to the remote slave mux. For larger multiplexers, especially those over 32 ports, ports can be set using a CRT console rather than individual port switches. For remote multiplexers with dial-in modems attached, it is often necessary to use a feature called autobaud. Autobaud means that the remote mux looks at the first character from the terminal, usually a carriage return, and sets the mux port speed for the duration of that data call. Diagnostic features include error counts on the high-speed modem line, statistical information concerning line use, channel use, active ports, buffer loading, etc. Test routines can include local and remote loopbacks, test data sent to terminals, RS-232C interface status, internal processor, and buffer tests. As more powerful processors and larger memory chips get lower in cost, the features continue to proliferate. Multiplexing has evolved from simple frequency division to time division to sophisticated traffic directing with microprocessors. The ever-increasing need for fast, efficient data communications combined with escalating phone line charges make multiplexers an essential element in any data communications environment. Sophistication, though, is almost synonymous with complication. The process of selecting equipment to meet specific needs in multiplexing, as in any other area, requires care and planning.